Thinking Out Loud with Dave Palmer. Here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm Keith Downey, your host. And how often do you think about the nature of the human soul? That's exactly what we're going to be talking about here. 5 facts about the human soul according to St. Thomas Aquinas. And what better person to help us understand it than Dave Palmer. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Keith. Good to be with you this morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. This is an interesting topic because I can't remember the last time I thought about the nature of the human soul. So I'm very intrigued about this as well. I'm sure our listeners as well.
Yeah, when you asked how often do you think about the nature of a human soul, I was thinking like every 5 minutes, because I'm like a philosophy and theology nerd, and so I love getting into this kind of stuff. And it was interesting listening to Dave Asherez with his word of the day being one, because when you think about the soul, it's really united to the body. So we've got one composite when it comes to the human person. And then, of course, asceticism. Oh, my goodness, talking about the soul and the body. So it all ties together. And last week, we had this successful Share-a-thon here on the Guadalupe Radio Network. And, at the top of every hour, you hear, Guadalupe Radio Network, a radio for your soul. And so what's a soul? What does it mean? And I think it's something that people just kind of take for granted. Yeah, I've got a soul, but no one's ever seen a soul. And so how do we know it exists? And what exactly is it? And I like to say when I teach high school students that the easiest way to understand a soul is to consider that if the soul leaves your body, which is the definition of death, what you're left with is a corpse. And so everything that's different between a corpse and you and I now, which hopefully nobody would confuse us of being a corpse, is based on the soul. So you can imagine that's a lot of things. Every single thing that we're doing that differentiates us from a corpse is because of our soul. So needless to say, it's very important. And, we've been kind of going sequentially through the Summa. And I know people may not have caught every single one of these segments, but the Summa starts with God, and then it goes into the angels, and then he goes into creation, and then the fourth kind of major topic would be called the Treatise on Man, and which is the treatise on human nature. What does it mean to be a human person? He spends 27 questions, probably about 150 articles, just delving into what is this? What does it mean to be a human person? And the very first thing that he gets into is the soul, because for reasons that I just explained, the soul is extremely important. And so I'll probably spend a few weeks on human nature, so this isn't going to exhaust everything on the human person. But when it comes to a soul, first thing you got to ask yourself is, well, what is it? What's the best definition? And Aquinas says, to seek the nature of a soul, we must premise that a soul is defined as the first principle of life of those things which live. We call things animate that live, and those things which have no life inanimate. Like a rock is inanimate, it doesn't have a soul. So the first thing is anything that's alive would have a soul. If it's moving around, a cricket or a grasshopper, it's going to have some kind of soul. But the only distinction is it has to have a body. And that's why angels, sometimes people are surprised that angels don't have souls, because they don't have bodies. And so you have to have a soul attached to a body. And we'll get a little bit more into that. And so that's your first fascinating fact about the soul, is the definition of it in and of itself. And then the second thing is Aquinas talks about something called subsistence. And subsistence means, can something exist on its own? Would a soul be able to exist if it's not in a body? And he's going to come down and say, well, here on earth, we have to have a body connected to a soul. Like I said before, otherwise you're dead, right? You're not alive. You're not a human person. But he also makes the distinction that unlike the brute animals, the human soul can survive on its own. And the reason why this is significant is that if it can't survive on its own, then when we die, we're done. Okay, like he would say with a plant or rhinoceros or a octopus, when they die, although they do have a soul, the soul and the body die at the same time, whereas ours is subsistent. And he goes into some very interesting, very detailed explanation of why this has to be the case and why the intellectual soul has to be able to live on its own. It's early in the morning. I'm not going to get into
Need more coffee for that conversation.
Yeah, that'll be another conversation, a whole different time after we've had a little bit more coffee. And so, so human souls are subsistent. They can live on their own. Animals, plants cannot. Okay, there are no rose souls floating around on their own. Okay, the soul of a flower always is going to be attached to a flower. All right, so the third thing, and this is something that I think is very important, and I think we may have talked about this before when we talked about angels, is that he says, is the human soul the same species as an angel? And you would think that if a soul is subsistent and it can live on its own after it departs from the body, well, what's the difference between that and an angel? Because it's kind of moving around and it doesn't have a body and its intellect, its will. But Thomas is very adamant that there's a big difference. The main difference is that an angel never, in their nature, is supposed to be attached to a body, right? Every now and then they'll assume bodies just for our good, but by definition, an angel does not have a body, and that's a big difference. Whereas a human soul is always seeking a body, even if it is not attached to a body, because you're not a human if you don't have a soul and a body together. All right, you're a separated soul and a corpse, but it's unnatural to have them separated like that. So those are the first three of your 5 fascinating facts about the human soul, Keith. I'll stop, take a sip of coffee here, and see if you have any questions.
No, so what you're telling me is that the hit children's movie All Dogs Go to Heaven is not theologically correct. Is that what I'm...
That's a good question. My personal take on this, I've never been to heaven, so I don't know. I've seen all the movies about it, but my personal take on it is that it could be that dogs might be in heaven, but only for our good. If somebody's happiness would be conducive. Now, Thomas, I don't think would say this. He doesn't say, if somebody's happy and they have, Fido in heaven with them, then certainly they should. But I think it's possible, but they would not be experiencing the beatific vision. They don't have intellect. They're never going to have intellect. And so, again, who knows? Would it be possible that we could have some material things that are conducive to our happiness in heaven? I don't know. Yeah. I'll let you know if and when I get there. Okay.
Sounds good.
It's a very pastoral question, especially for children, because children want to know these kind of things, and the truth is we don't know for sure. But with that caveat, so the fourth thing is what are the different kinds of souls? I've already mentioned that plants have souls, and all the brute animals have souls, and human beings have souls. Angels don't have souls. So there's 3 kinds of souls. You have something called a nutritive soul, which a plant would have, that it just kind of keeps it alive, and the different systems within it. And we have a nutritive soul. It's the kind of the involuntary things like the blood flowing through our body, and the respiratory system, and the excretory system, the reproductive system, things we don't necessarily think about. They just happen to keep us alive, our growth, our nutrition. And so then the sensitive soul has to do with our 5 senses, sight and hearing, and we share that with our dogs and our cats and that kind of thing. But then what really distinguishes us from the brute animals is that we have a rational soul. And also they're all one in us. We don't have 3 souls. We have one soul that has all those components. And so really the cool thing about it is when you see all these other creatures, even a blade of grass or a tree or a butterfly, there's something we have in common with them, but we're also elevated. They don't have rational souls, and that's a huge difference. And so those are the 3 types of souls. And then you add appetite and movement, and you pretty much have everything that a soul does. We move around, and we have desires. We want cheeseburgers and French fries, and to get that perfect job or whatever. These are all appetites. So that's the fourth thing. And then the final thing is, do those powers of the soul remain when the soul separates from the body? All right. So when you do have this separated soul that's not an angel, what can it still do? Right. Well, it's not going to be able to eat that cheeseburger, of course, and it's not going to feel pain. So Aquinas would say that really the separated soul, the only thing it really has is the rational features. It has intellect, it has will, which makes it amazingly like an angel, but not an angel. All right. So he gets a lot into this, So like, well, why is it not an angel? Or how does it come to know things, when it's separated from the soul? Because I came to know you because I see you, right? The reason I know Keith Downey is because I've seen you. I shook your hand one time, and so there was a physical interaction, right? But how does the separated soul do this? It's very angelic-like, but it's not an angel. All right. So, so those are five things. That does not exhaust the interesting things that Aquinas says about the soul and the Summa, but those are five things that I think people can take in their day today, and some good conversations around the water cooler at work, hopefully.
That's right. We're going to be talking about the nature of human souls in between our meetings about those TPS reports. No, that's very interesting, because you mentioned these are like really interesting 5 facts about this nature of the human soul. But you mentioned there's how much more does he talk about souls?
Oh, he goes into a lot. There's this I try to keep pretty simple, but gets very specific. Like I said, in all those different aspects, like what is the intellect and what is the will, and you get into the appetites and the difference between the sensitive appetite and the intellectual appetite. And so, like I said, he asks about 150 different questions about the human person, and very little of it doesn't have to do with the soul, because there's not a lot of questions you can ask about a corpse, So it's all pretty much related to the soul one way or the other.
Wow. Incredible. Thank you so much, Dave, for joining us this morning and breaking those 5 interesting facts down about the human soul. We can also catch you on Back to the Father this coming Friday at 1 p.m. Central on GRN Online, YouTube, Facebook, social media in general. But thank you so much, Dave. And that is the end of our first hour. So we understand that some people are going to be staying tuned to listen to the Holy Mass. If that is the case, please pray for us per usual. We will continue to pray for you. But there is a whole nother second hour of Morning Joy coming up next, right after this quick little break here. So much morning and joy happening. So stay tuned right after this break on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.